Here's a week of a decolonized diet by Kelly Ojeda. Okay, so here's the decolonized menu that I created. When deciding what to put on this menu, I wanted to make something that aligned with contemporary eating habits. So I try to make it as appetizing to today's society as I could. And for me, the most exciting meals of the day are breakfast and dinner. So I only included pictures of those, and they align with the actual menu. So on the left we have breakfast, and on the right we have dinner. For indigenous communities, food was a big part of their culture. Their food practices involve plants and animals in ways that would benefit their health, but also the well being of the land that they lived on. Food was a big part of the preservation of indigenous culture, actually. And in this picture are all indigenous chefs, and them continuing to make indigenous foods and showcasing that to today's society is a way of preserving their culture. The native food systems were connected so deeply to the lands they resided on, and that's a reason that their diets were so interesting to me, and I decided to do the menu option because while keeping themselves well nourished, they also maintained ecological balance. The three sisters, for example, which are corn, beans, and squash, actually nurtured each other. Indigenous food systems were complex but also sustainable. However, colonization disrupted these systems and replaced them with European agricultural practices, which impacted native people's health and also their sovereignty. And then here on the right, we have just a chart of traditional native food principles. So, what was the role of food in decolonization? It connected very deeply with indigenous identity. Traditional food practices were integral to cultural heritage, spirituality, and community. However, foods for many indigenous communities also held healing powers, and there was a lot of healing through food. Um, Reviving the ancestral diets would be able to restore health and combat diet related diseases such as diabetes, which is a big one among indigenous communities. And eating traditional foods would foster a connection to not only lands but also ancestors. Key ingredients that I kept in mind when creating my menu were obviously the one we've spoken about before is the three sisters, which is corn, beans, and squash, which held nutritional balance and served as cultural symbolism. A big one we spoke about in class was wild rice, which was a nutrient rich grain, usually in the Great Lakes region. I also considered bison, which was more of a plain staple, and acorn and sunflower seeds. And these were a big one in my menu because they were sources of flour and fats. So use it to make pancakes or muffins or even porridge. Also wild greens, which were very nutritional but also served as medicinal. Regarding revitalization efforts, food was a way of reclaiming control and restoring self sufficiency. in indigenous communities. There was also health benefits, addressing issues like diabetes and hypertension by replacing today's processed food with more organic foods and indigenous food systems. Today, we all have many indigenous chefs and activists that blend both traditional and modern culinary practices so that we can bring back native eating habits in a more contemporary and realistic way for today's society. Overall, food served as cultural revitalization and empowerment in indigenous communities, and going back to indigenous eating habits would help heal generational trauma through the restoring of traditional practices. Indigenous food systems were sustainable and had ecological benefits, and they also helped strengthen indigenous health and sovereignty. In indigenous communities, food was more than a sustenance. It was an act of resilience and a form of cultural reclamation. That's it. Thank you.